She inherited an abandoned homestead in rural Montana until she discovered a locked cellar that held a secret capable of changing everything. Can you imagine inheriting an entire property and finding out there's a room that should never be opened? It sounds like something out of a nightmare. But this story really happened in America during the 1870s. Before we continue, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and leave your like, because the ending of this story will surprise you in ways you never imagined. What was in that cellar changed the fate of an entire family. And tell me here in the comments, what state are you watching this story from? I'd love to know how far these emotional stories are reaching. It was early spring of 1873 when Catherine Morrison received the news that would change her life forever. A letter arrived at her modest home in Denver, Colorado, brought by a messenger covered in dust from the long road. The letter came from a county clerk in a remote town in Montana Territory. Her uncle, Samuel Morrison, had passed away, and she, his only niece, had inherited everything he owned. Catherine sat in silence for long minutes, holding the paper between trembling fingers. Samuel Morrison. She barely remembered his face. She had seen her uncle only twice in her life, both times when she was a child. He was a tall man with a distant gaze who spoke little and smiled even less. After that, Samuel completely isolated himself on his homestead, and the family lost contact. Catherine had been a widow for 4 years. Her husband Thomas died from pneumonia, leaving her with 2 grown children and a tight financial situation. William, the eldest, was 28 years old and worked as a clerk in a general store. Margaret, the youngest at 24, helped her mother with sewing work. Life was hard but dignified. The inheritance seemed like a blessing sent from heaven, a homestead, land, possessions. Perhaps it was the chance to start over, to give her children a better future. 4 weeks later, Catherine, William, and Margaret set out on a journey in a rented wagon. The road was long and dusty, cutting through valleys and prairies. They passed through small settlements, crossed rivers on rickety ferries. They slept in modest inns. With each mile, the scenery became wilder, more isolated. When they finally arrived at the homestead, the sun was already setting on the horizon, painting everything orange and crimson. The property was larger than Catherine had imagined. There were broken fences marking pastures overtaken by tall grass. Ancient cottonwood trees spread across the land. And in the center of it all stood the main house. It was an imposing structure of stone and dark timber, with 2 stories and wide porches. But the abandonment was evident. Broken shingles, dirty windows, doors creaking in the wind, wild vines climbing the walls like green fingers trying to suffocate the structure. Margaret climbed down from the wagon and looked around with wide eyes. "Mother, this place looks haunted." "Don't talk nonsense, Margaret. It's just an old house that needs care," Catherine replied, trying to sound confident. William helped his mother down and began unloading the few bags they'd brought. It was then that an elderly man emerged from behind the house, walking slowly, leaning on a makeshift cane. He was thin, hunched over, with disheveled white hair and worn clothes. "You must be Mrs. Morrison," he said, removing a torn straw hat. "Yes, I am, and you are." "Jacob Henderson, ma'am. I was caretaker for Mr. Samuel for over 30 years. Took care of what I could here, but the homestead is too big for one man alone." Catherine extended her hand, and Mr. Henderson shook it gently. There was sadness in those sunken eyes. "I'm sorry for the loss of my uncle. You must have been close to him." "I was, yes, ma'am. Mr. Samuel was a good man." "Quiet, but good. He lived alone here, hardly speaking to anyone, but he always treated me with respect." "Did he leave any message? Any instructions?" Mr. Henderson hesitated. He looked at the house, then back at Catherine. "He did, ma'am, but perhaps it would be better for you to rest first. The journey was long. You can speak." "Mr. Henderson, I'm fine." The old caretaker sighed deeply. "Mr. Samuel asked me to care for the homestead until you arrived, and he asked me to tell you something. There's a cellar beneath the house. The entrance is in the back pantry, a trapdoor in the floor. That cellar, he said it should never be opened." "Never." Catherine frowned. "What do you mean, never be opened?" "He locked that cellar many years ago, ma'am. Put chains and padlocks on it, and made me swear I would never try to enter. Said what was down there should stay there forever." Margaret moved closer to her mother, grabbing her arm. "Mother, I don't like this. What kind of man locks a cellar that way?" William crossed his arms. "Must be some old man's eccentricity. Maybe he kept money down there, or important documents. I don't know what's down there. Son, said Mr. Henderson, but Mr. Samuel had his reasons. Good reasons, and if I were you, ma'am, I would respect his wishes. Catherine looked at the house. The second-story window seemed like empty eyes, watching her in silence. Let's go inside. It's getting dark, she said, trying to hide the shiver running up her spine. The inside of the house was even more impressive. Antique furniture covered with white sheets, crystal chandeliers thick with dust, Persian rugs faded by time. Everything had an air of decayed grandeur, as if the house remembered better days. Mr. Henderson lit oil lamps and showed them the main rooms. The parlor, the large kitchen with an enormous wood-burning stove. The pantry still with some stored provisions. 3 bedrooms on the ground floor in reasonable condition. You and the young lady can sleep down here tonight. Tomorrow in the daylight you can see the upstairs better. And the locked cellar? Asked William. In the back pantry, like I said. But don't go near that trapdoor, son. That's what I ask. Margaret shuddered. I'm not going anywhere near it. Catherine took a deep breath. Let's all rest. We'll think about what to do tomorrow. But that night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She lay on the hard bed, staring at the dark wooden ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. The wind beating against the windows, the beams creaking, and something else, footsteps. Slow footsteps on the floor above, dragging, as if someone was pacing back and forth. Catherine sat up in bed, her heart racing. She remained motionless, listening. The footsteps continued for several minutes, then stopped. Then came another sound. A heavy dragging, as if someone was moving furniture. She got up, lit a candle, and left the room. The hallway was dark and cold, but then she heard something different. Coming from below, from beneath the floorboards. A scratching sound, persistent, like fingernails clawing at wood from underneath. Catherine's blood ran cold. She stood frozen in the hallway, the candle trembling in her hand. The scratching continued, then stopped abruptly, and in the silence that followed she heard it. A voice, muffled, distant, coming from beneath the house. Help me! Catherine dropped the candle. It went out as it hit the floor. She was left in total darkness, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from her chest. She ran back to her room and locked the door. She didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, Catherine said nothing about what she'd heard. Margaret was already frightened enough, and William would certainly say it was her imagination. But she knew what she had heard. Footsteps upstairs, scratching from below, and a voice. A voice asking for help. Mr. Henderson prepared simple coffee and bread in the kitchen. They ate in silence. Did you sleep well, ma'am? Asked the old caretaker. Not really, Catherine replied. The house makes many noises at night. It does, ma'am. It's old. The wood settles with the temperature. And the cellar? Does it make noises too? Mr. Henderson stopped chewing. He swallowed slowly. Sometimes, ma'am. Sometimes. What kind of noises? The old caretaker looked down at his plate. The kind of noise it's better not to investigate. Margaret dropped her bread. I knew it. This place is haunted. Mother, we need to leave. Don't be dramatic, Margaret, said William. It's just the wind and old wood. Nothing more? Then why does Mr. Henderson have that look on his face? He knows something. Everyone looked at the caretaker. He sighed, placed his trembling hands on the table. I promised Mr. Samuel I wouldn't say anything. But you're the owner of the homestead now, ma'am. So perhaps you have the right to know. Catherine leaned forward. Mr. Henderson, please. What happened here? The old caretaker took a deep breath. When he began to speak, his voice was heavy with pain. Mr. Samuel wasn't always so solitary. When I arrived here, he was young, full of life. This homestead was prosperous. It had workers, cattle, crops, and he was engaged to be married. Married? Catherine's eyes widened. My uncle was going to marry? Yes, ma'am. To a young woman named Eleanor Whitmore, daughter of a wealthy rancher from the region. The marriage would unite 2 powerful families. Everything was arranged. The date set. Preparations made. What happened? Mr. Henderson closed his eyes. Eleanor didn't love Mr. Samuel. She loved another man. A ranch hand who worked here. A young man named James. They met in secret. Exchanged letters. Planned to run away together. My God, Catherine whispered. The night before the wedding, Eleanor ran away. She took her wedding dress and went to meet James in a line shack in the woods near the creek. Someone saw and told Mr. Samuel. He went mad with rage, grabbed his rifle and went after them. Margaret covered her mouth with her hands. William had gone pale. "What did he do?" asked Catherine, her voice trembling. "There was a fight. James tried to defend Eleanor. Mr. Samuel shot him. James died instantly. Eleanor, desperate, ran out of the shack. There was a cliff near the creek. She was wearing her wedding dress, and she jumped. Mr. Samuel tried to grab her, but couldn't. She fell and died. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. "Dear God," murmured Catherine, feeling tears streaming down her face. Mr. Samuel lost his mind. He brought Eleanor's body back, buried her and James in the small cemetery on the property, far from everyone's sight. But the wedding dress, he didn't bury it. He kept it, along with the letters Eleanor wrote to James. He locked everything in the cellar and never opened it again. Never spoke of it again. Sent all the workers away. Closed down the homestead and lived here alone, carrying the guilt for the rest of his life. Catherine was shaking. He killed 2 people? It was an accident, ma'am. Or at least that's what I want to believe. Mr. Samuel was never a violent man. But that day, rage and humiliation took hold of him, and he paid dearly for it. He lived the rest of his life tormented. That's why he locked that cellar. That's why he made me swear it would never be opened. He said what was down there should be forgotten forever. Catherine wiped the tears from her face. And the noises? Where do they come from? Mr. Henderson shook his head. I don't know, ma'am. Sometimes I think it's just guilt making us hear things. Other times I'm certain there's someone down there. Walking, crying, trying to get out. Margaret stood abruptly from the table. I'm not staying another day in this house. Mother, we need to leave now. Margaret, calm down, said Catherine, but her own voice was failing. Calm down? There's a cellar with a blood-stained wedding dress of a dead woman, and you want me to calm down? William grabbed his sister by the shoulder. Margaret, this happened over 20 years ago. Uncle Samuel is dead. Eleanor and James are too. There's nothing that can harm us. You don't know that. You didn't hear the noises? I heard them too, said Catherine quietly. Everyone turned to her. What? Asked William. Last night I heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy dragging, and when I went to the hallway, I heard scratching coming from beneath the floorboards. And a voice asking for help. Mr. Henderson closed his eyes and made the sign of the cross. That's why I warned you, ma'am. That cellar should never be opened. Never. The following days were tense. Catherine tried to focus on organizing the house and assessing what could be salvaged. The homestead had value. The land was good. With investment, it could become productive again. But the presence of that locked cellar weighed on everyone like a dark cloud. Margaret refused to go anywhere near the back pantry. She slept on the opposite side of the house with her door locked. William tried to maintain rationality, but even he began to hear the noises, footsteps, dragging, and occasionally a low, prolonged crying. Catherine couldn't get the story out of her head. Eleanor, James, Samuel, a tragedy that destroyed 3 lives. And now, decades later, that secret remained locked away, like a wound that never healed. One afternoon, while sorting through the few belongings Samuel had left, Catherine found a journal. It was old, bound in worn leather. She opened it carefully. The first pages were simple records. Notes about the homestead, expenses, harvests, but as she read on, the tone changed. I can't sleep. I see her face every night. Falling. Always falling. James didn't deserve to die. He only loved. And I took that from him. Took everything. The dress still has blood on it. I can't wash it. Can't throw it away. It's all that's left of her. Sometimes I hear knocking from inside the cellar. I know it's my mind, but I hear it. And I'm afraid to open it. Catherine closed the journal, her hands trembling. Samuel had lived in torment until the end. Guilt had consumed him alive. That night the noises were worse. They were no longer just footsteps. They were banging. Loud, insistent, coming from beneath the house. Catherine, William, and Margaret gathered in the parlor, listening to the pounding coming from below. That's not wood settling, said William, pale. I told you this place was wrong? Margaret cried out. Mr. Henderson appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a lantern. It's getting worse, isn't it? He said, weary. What's happening here, Mr. Henderson? Asked Catherine, desperate. Mr. Samuel held on to that secret for too long, and now that he's gone, it seems like the things he locked away want to come out. This is madness, said William. Ghosts don't exist. The banging stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. "I'm going to open that cellar," Catherine said suddenly. "Mother, no!" Margaret screamed. "You can't do that, ma'am," said Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Samuel asked." "Samuel is dead," Catherine replied firmly. "And whatever is in that cellar is tormenting this house. It's tormenting us. It needs to end. What if it's something dangerous?" asked William. "Then we'll face it. But I won't live in fear in my own home." The next morning, Catherine rode into the nearest town and hired a blacksmith. The man was burly with large calloused hands. She explained that she needed to break some old padlocks. When they arrived at the homestead and the blacksmith saw the trap door in the pantry floor, he hesitated. "This was locked up, not to be opened, ma'am." "I know, but I need it opened. It's not my business, but—" "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." The blacksmith began his work. He used an iron pry bar to force the padlocks. The metal groaned and twisted. Sparks flew. Mr. Henderson watched from a distance, praying quietly. Margaret refused to come near. William stood beside his mother, tense. The first padlock broke with a sharp crack. Then the second. The third resisted more, but finally gave way. The chains fell to the floor with a metallic sound that echoed through the entire house. The blacksmith wiped sweat from his forehead. "Done, ma'am. But I'm not going down there. I've done my part." Catherine paid the man, who left quickly without looking back. Now it was just Catherine, William, and the trapdoor. "Mother, are you sure about this?" asked William, his voice failing. "No, but it needs to be done." Catherine reached down and pulled the heavy wooden trapdoor open. It swung up with a loud creak, revealing darkness below. A strong smell of mold and something else, something sweet and sickly, rose from the cellar like an exhalation. Catherine grabbed a lantern. "Stay here if you want." "I'm coming with you," said William. They descended the wooden stairs. Each step creaked under their weight. The cellar was larger than Catherine expected. Stone walls, a dirt floor, and in the center a wooden trunk ornately carved. Catherine approached slowly. Each step felt like it weighed a ton. She placed her hands on the trunk. It was cold. She took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, letters. Dozens of them tied with faded ribbons. Catherine picked one up and opened it. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. "My dearest James, I can't bear living this lie anymore. My heart belongs to you and only you. I'll run away tomorrow night. Wait for me at the shack. We'll start a new life, far from everything and everyone. With eternal love, Eleanor." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. They were love letters, pure, desperate. William picked up another letter, then another. They all followed the same tone. Eleanor and James loved each other deeply and were destroyed for it. But beneath the letters was something more. A dress, a wedding dress, white with delicate lace, but stained. Stained with something dark. Dried blood. Catherine stepped back, her hand over her mouth. "Dear God." William saw it too. He stood in silence, his face pale, and then Catherine saw something else. At the bottom of the trunk, one last letter. But this one wasn't tied with the others. It was loose. Catherine picked it up and opened it. The handwriting was different. "Harsh, irregular, masculine. Eleanor, forgive me. Forgive me for what I did. I took your life. I took James's life. I destroyed everything out of pride and rage. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve peace. I'll carry this with me until the end. But I need you to know it wasn't hatred. It was pain. And now that pain is all I have left. Samuel." Catherine began to cry. These weren't tears of fear. They were tears of compassion. Samuel had carried that weight alone for decades. He lived in penance, isolated himself from the world, and died without ever finding peace. "Mother, what do we do now?" asked William, his voice choked. Catherine wiped her tears. She looked around the cellar. It no longer seemed frightening. It seemed sad, deeply sad. "We're going to give this a dignified end," she said. Catherine sought out the pastor from the town. She explained the situation, or at least part of it. She said she'd found belongings of deceased people and would like to bless them before burying them properly. The pastor, an elderly man with kind eyes, agreed. He didn't ask questions. A few days later, Catherine, William, Margaret, Mr. Henderson, and the pastor gathered at the small cemetery on the homestead. It was a forgotten place, hidden among trees, with a few rotting wooden crosses marking old graves. Catherine brought the wedding dress and the letters. She placed everything in a simple wooden box. The pastor said a short but sincere service. He prayed for peace for the souls of Eleanor, James, and Samuel. He asked forgiveness for the mistakes made. He asked that the suffering end. Mr. Henderson wept openly. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that tragedy, the first time anyone had spoken their names aloud with respect. They buried the box beside the old crosses. Catherine placed wildflowers on the fresh earth. "Rest in peace," she said quietly. "All of you." That night, for the first time since they'd arrived at the homestead, Catherine slept peacefully. There were no footsteps, no dragging, no crying. The house was silent, a peaceful silence. In the weeks that followed, Catherine made a decision. She wouldn't sell the homestead. On the contrary, she would renovate the property and give it a new purpose. With the money Samuel had left saved and some sales of unused land, she began the work. She fixed the roof, painted the walls, renovated the rooms, and transformed the homestead into a shelter for widows without resources from the region. Women who had lost husbands and had nowhere to go. Women with small children, women alone in the world. All were welcome there. The cellar, which had once held secrets, was cleaned and turned into a root cellar again, a place to store food for the women and children who found refuge above. Mr. Henderson, who decided to stay, tended the garden around the house. The women who arrived at the homestead heard the story. Not all the sordid details, but the essentials. Samuel had made mistakes. He'd carried guilt. But in the end, he'd left behind something that could be transformed into hope. And that hope multiplied. Women who arrived broken left strengthened. Children who had no future found opportunities. The homestead, which had been a place of pain, became a place of new beginnings. Catherine discovered her purpose. It wasn't just to inherit, it was to transform, to take the ashes of the past and plant seeds of the future in them. One evening, while walking the homestead under the moonlight, Catherine stopped in front of the small cemetery. The flowers they'd planted on Eleanor, James, and Samuel's graves were blooming. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me transform your pain into something good." The wind blew softly, rustling the cottonwood trees, and Catherine felt for the first time that they were at peace. Finally at peace. And so ends the story of the widow who inherited a homestead and discovered a cellar that held more than objects. It held the pain of an entire lifetime. Samuel carried a burden no one should carry alone. But Catherine, with courage and compassion, managed to transform that place of pain into a place of hope. And you? What would you do if you inherited a property with a locked secret? Tell me here in the comments. Your opinion is very important to me. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave your like. There's a new story every week here. And don't leave yet. Click on the next recommended video that appears on your screen now. Another emotional story is waiting for you. Until next time.